Hi guys, welcome back to Ryan C. Murphy's Guide to the Movies. I'm Ryan Murphy, and today I'm talking to you about Guardians of the Galaxy. I really like talking about this movie because it's one of my favorite Marvel movies. It's one of my favorite movies. And what's interesting about this movie is I always talk about structure and plot and try and deconstruct all of that. And this movie has a very simple plot. This movie has a very sort of archetypal plot. And it's really dependent as a film on the characters. The characters are what make it a great film. The plot is very, like I said, archetypal. There's a MacGuffin. If you don't know what a MacGuffin is an object in a film that becomes the source of the plot. If there's a single object in a film that everyone's after, that's a MacGuffin, like the Ark in Raiders of the Lost Ark, the Holy Grail in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Indiana Jones franchise is known for its MacGuffins. So in this, it's the orb, right? And basically, the plot of the movie is there's a bad guy who wants the orb, and our heroes come together and realize they have to stop him from getting it. And then he gets it 2/3 of the way through the movie. Of course, he gets it, and then the last third, the last act is they have to prevent him from doing what he plans on doing with it. So that's pretty basic. The characters are what make it a great movie. It's the fact that we not only like the characters, but we like their chemistry, and we love the fact that they come together and form a family. You can just say, I'm going to make a movie about lost characters forming a family, but unless they're actually not only good characters individually, but characters that have great chemistry together, that's not going to work. This film did it well. This sort of idea goes back to the original Star Wars movie, right? That movie worked because the characters they brought together were, in that case, very archetypal. George Lucas used the innocent farm boy, the roguish sidekick, the Merlin-like sage, the princess. A lot of those were reused in the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. If you ever notice, those movies are basically rip-offs of the entire Star Wars trilogy. And in this, you get a good mix of characters. You get your lead character, who's a little bit like Han Solo, but goofier and not necessarily as competent, who is often a side character in movies like this, but in this case is our main character. You have the female lead, who obviously they're going to be love interest to each other, and she's different from him in that she's the straight and narrow character. She's the straight man. If you don't know what I mean by the straight man, that's an old term, doesn't have anything to do with anyone's sexuality, but it means the person who's the least goofy and oftentimes the moral center as well. She is the most serious character, and she is possibly the most morally upright. Well, she is the most morally upright character, which is ironic because she's an assassin. That's her background. She has maybe the darkest background of anyone else. Our main character is a thief, and she is an assassin. She's been working for Thanos her whole life, even though she was pretty much forced into it. But nevertheless, she has her own code, and she's trying to atone for her past misdeeds. She's trying to fight against her father and his acolytes. So she is the moral center of the group. She is the most serious member of the group, and she becomes the straight and narrow, which of course means she has that kind of chemistry with our main character, and again they become love interests. Then you have the two bounty hunters. One is definitely the most, possibly the most morally challenged, Rocket, and the most sarcastic and the most humorous in a way. And then you have the character who has the Chewbacca syndrome, who's there and the audience doesn't understand what he's saying. And then you have Drax, who's crazy. And I like the fact that he doesn't come. He's the last to come in because he's the only one not searching for money in some way. So he only meets them when they're all in prison, and he just wants revenge. But he adds to the chemistry by just being the crazy one. And there you have it. I mean, that's the group of characters. Those sort of types of characters. James Gunn decided would be the best ones to come together and be lost characters that needed each other. And that's my favorite type of story. Ask anyone. That's sort of my cup of tea. So that's why I like this movie so much. So, again, the plot of the movie is Ronan wants the orb. What's interesting, I'll say here at this point, is that this movie had to alter its plot a little bit for to take its place in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. James Gunn initially had a plot without Thanos involved at all, and Kevin Feige and the folks at Marvel were like, well, can you work Thanos into it, because that's part of the bigger tapestry we're going for, and he had to work him into it. It's really interesting because once I heard that, I can easily figure out what it was like before Thanos was involved, because literally I can imagine the plot just simply being Ronan wants the orb because he hates Xandar and he wants to destroy Xandar, and the orb can do that. He gets the orb and tries to destroy Xandar. So the way it changes once Thanos is involved is Ronan wants the orb because Thanos wants it and promises to destroy Xandar for him if he gets it for him. but Ronan doesn't know what it is, and then he gets it, finds out what it is, and decides to destroy Xandar with it instead of giving it to Thanos. That's it. That's the only way the plot changed. There's also the added idea of Nebula and Gamora, and the fact that they're Thanos' daughters. I would imagine in the original story they were just people who had been working for Ronan, and again, Gamora decided to go straight, and Nebula did not. But they add in that they're the daughters of Thanos who have been lent out to Ronan, and there you go. And I like the character of Nebula in this movie because she's sort of the yin to Gamora's yang. You have these two sisters who are both raised to be living weapons by Thanos, and one of them decides to go the straight and narrow and become a good person and fight for the forces of good, and the other doesn't. Although she does eventually. And let's be honest, they both betray Thanos in this movie. They both follow a similar path in that respect. Again, in the original script, they were probably just working for Ronan, so Nebula didn't change at all or betray anyone. But once Thanos was involved in the script, the screenwriters had to be like, oh, she has to continue working for Ronan even after he betrays Thanos, so she betrays Thanos too. But at any rate, she is the yin to Gamora's yang in that respect. In this movie, you have the two sisters. And I like that. So all the characters come together in prison. You know, Quill is trying to get the orb for money, or sell the orb for money. Gamora is trying to get the orb for the right purposes. And Rocket and Groot were trying to collect a bounty on Quill. Okay, so they all have their different motivations. They all meet Drax in prison, and they all agree that they have to get rid of the orb, and so they decided to sell it to this third buyer, the Collector. The reason the Collector's in the movie is so that there's something to do for the second act, right? We've had all our characters meet by the end of the first act and escape from prison together, and then we know that Ronan has to get the orb from them, and then they have to fight him in the third act. So what do we do in the second act? We have to have something to do, so that's why the Collector's there, so that we have something for them to do, and during that time they can bond and do all that good stuff. So that's why that's there. Once we get to the end of the third act, I really like the scene where everything goes wrong, where the bad guys come and Ronan gets the orb. Because one thing I like about it is there's three nemeses involved in the scene. There's three characters who meet their arch nemeses in the scene where all the crap hits the fan. You have the Ravagers, who are the people Quill betrayed, who come to get him, and then you have Nebula, who fights Gamora. And then you have Ronan, who fights Drax, and Drax is actually the person whose fault it is. He called Ronan there for this explicit purpose. So I like the fact that a lot of people are meeting the people they don't want to meet in that scene. It's kind of an interesting screenwriting thing. And of course, then the Ravagers also serve another purpose in that they're there to help make the third act, and that they're now going to help our heroes, and we can have a little bit more of an elaborate action scene in the third act. That's one of the reasons why they're there. And yeah, it happens. The good guys win. And yeah. So again, a lot of this goes back to the characters more than the structure. And it's also the execution. I mean, it's the screenplay. I mean, let's face facts. The fact this is a movie that has the main character saving the day in the end by dancing to the 5 stair steps. Ooh, child. That is pretty great. That's why this movie is so great. Not that in particular, but just that kind of thing throughout the whole screenplay. There's lots of little details, like, you know, once you get the whole story going, then you have to go in and you have to write a screenplay, and then in that screenplay you sprinkle in little details. And I like, one of those aspects I like about this movie is the fact that Yondu likes his little desk toys. And if you pay attention, you know, they just put that idea in there in one scene, and then they follow it up in another scene, and then in the end, when Quill betrays Yondu, he gives him, instead of the orb, he gives him a troll doll. So it's almost like a consolation prize. It's like, hey, here you go, take this. I know you like these sorts of things, and this is a popular one on Earth, and it's amusing to the audience because it's a troll doll, and it's just a little detail that I like about the movie. And that's the devil's in the details quite often. But overall, the movie has a very basic plot, but is made a great movie from great characters who we want to see come together as a family. We rejoice when they're together at the end of the movie. They formed a family. They're going off to have further adventures. And it's in the execution. It's in the details a lot, too. So that's what I have to say about Guardians of the Galaxy. Tune in next time, and I'll talk about Avengers Age of Ultron. Thanks, guys.